Okay, I think it should be good to go now. Yes. Okay, so today what we will do is we will look into some of the basics of JavaScript. Again, my purpose, we are done with the smart contracts and also the different architectures, especially Ethereum, and we also covered Hyperledger, Fabric, and things like that. So now we will move into the programming part. So before going into the smart contract programming, again we will use Solidity for programming and the Remix IDE and other things. But before going further, I just want to give some quick recap on the JavaScript, because JavaScript is used as part of the smart contract programming, especially when you develop the smart contract. You will write the code in Solidity. You will compile them, but the way you communicate and you deploy the contracts and query the contracts and instantiate the contracts using JavaScript. Because JavaScript is more or less became the default language for web programming. So that's why I thought of giving some brief introduction to JavaScript. Again, don't expect me that I will teach JavaScript from basics, right? So what I mean to say is I'm not going to teach how to write hello world programs and how to declare variables and things like that. But what I will do is I will focus more on the advanced features of JavaScript, more from the language perspective, right? The rest of the things you can easily get it. If you search online or if you ask the Google, the ChatGPT, they can give you a lot better programming and experiences, right? So let's focus on some of the important aspects of JavaScript. So this is a good material. Of course, this is not our own material. This is a material given by our materials prepared around 2010, 2015, and the JavaScript has not changed much since. Right? It is called the ECMC script. So the reason why it is called ECMS script is probably you might have known that JavaScript has been a lot of history. So it was started initially by Netscape and those guys as JavaScript, as a language, programming language for client-side scripting, especially how to interact with browser components. So that was the main purpose for the JavaScript in the early 90s when the browsers were invented, right? Netscape browser was invented by Mozilla and other people. And then what happened is Microsoft, they came up with their own JavaScript called JScript. Because they don't want to compete with the proprietary, and then you have a lot of paint editing and other kinds of things. And again, Microsoft was initially, nowadays it's more valuing the open source and things like that, but it was very proprietary in 2000, those periods. So then you have different versions of the JavaScript. For example, Internet Explorer supports JScript, which is a different kind of JavaScript, but all other than Microsoft, Sun, Java, and other browsers and other people, they use it to use another version of JavaScript. And finally, there was a lot of discussion in the industry standards and things like that. I think around 2005 or 2008, they went for a standardization. So probably you don't know the history, but most of the browsers nowadays are running this ECMC script. What is ECMC? ECMC is a short form for European Computer Manufacturing Association, and these are the guys who took the initiative to promote JavaScript as a standardization format. So that's why it is called ECMC script. And nowadays, most of the browsers, they actually support this script, right? And not only that, JavaScript has been grown a lot. When back in days in 2000, around 2002, 2003, when I was doing programming, I was working in the Danish industry, and I was working with the web services, web applications, and things like that. The amount of capability of JavaScript is very, very limited. In those days, it's just producing alerts and clicking buttons and just visualizing and interacting with user interface components. But later, yes, it has increased enormously, and a lot of advanced features have been added to that. So the focus today is we will briefly look into the JavaScript, especially the language highlights and inspiration from which languages they took, and type objects and functions. We'll look into the functions and objects most importantly, because those are the things you will need most. And we will also see a bit of dynamic code evaluation. So many times, even though many times there is JavaScript running, you can't see the JavaScript code, the source code. For example, if you look into the Facebook and other kinds of applications, they do a lot of tricks using JavaScript. They will hide the code and other kinds of things. So they use dynamic code evaluation. So the code will be evaluated dynamically so that they can create objects and the functions without the user, without letting the user know and things like that. We will see some of the examples on the dynamic code evaluation. And also I will briefly talk about the inheritance. Inheritance, how you can create inheritance in JavaScript. JavaScript is a script-based language, right? So it doesn't have object-oriented features, but you can emulate the object-oriented features using the prototype-based inheritance. Basically, we will also briefly look upon it. And I keep these concepts, probably we don't cover today, and they are available in the slides. These are very advanced concepts. So the closures, function closures in JavaScript, you can use as a function, not a pointer, a hanger kind of thing. So this is a very advanced functionality. And you can also create modules or namespaces or packages in JavaScript. So these are we have some examples here. Let's see, it depends upon the interest. Maybe we will cover it in the later lecture. Otherwise, you can go through them later. Right, so we'll focus more on the dynamic and unusual aspects of language rather than how to use JavaScript. And again, I'm also saving a good book. This is maybe just give me a minute. I will also copy the book to the readings folder so that I don't forget. Right, so just 1 second. This is a book called Definitive Guide to JavaScript. So let me just save it to the folder and then you can have it. So I also saved it in the course reading materials. So you also have the book. It's a O'Reilly book, which is normally freely available, and it's a good book about the JavaScript. If you want to learn more about it, then you can refer to it. So let's get started with that. So again, I was briefly telling you about the motivation, why JavaScript and things like that. So a little bit of motivation. JavaScript was initially a client-side scripting, especially for dealing and interacting with the HTML components, right? For example, validating user input is one of the main functionality of JavaScript back in the days when the browsers were newly invented and web applications were developed, right? So for example, if the page want to take an input for email, then they need to make sure that the user only enters the email. So what you do is you will verify the input entered by the user is in the email format or not, right? So these are called input validations. And Ajax, it's a functionality to call the server-side scripting without refreshing the page. So this is Ajax functionality, which is added to JavaScript at later years. And HTML rewriting and creating dynamic boxes and other kinds, right? So why it is important is its power and ability to bring online application more live, right? So generate dynamic user experiences and functions across all platforms. To give a best example, the Facebook, it uses a lot of JavaScript techniques. So probably you might have seen that the Facebook is quite fast when you load into a page. Do you know how much content they transfer? they transfer, for example, if the page contains 10 or 10 components, like the top component, central component, other friends component, and things like that. So they load different pages in parallel using the JavaScript and things like that. And Gmail also, all these companies, they have developed their own proprietary libraries and doing a lot of stuff using JavaScript, so that the user don't get a feeling saying that, okay, this page is taking 5 seconds or 10 seconds to load or something like that. So when you go to the Facebook, it loads spontaneously. And to load that much of content in a HTML and that much bandwidth, it's not easily possible without the lot of hacks using the JavaScript. When I was teaching JavaScript back in the days, 2014, 15, those time at the university, I used to teach them how Facebook and Google hack. We don't say hack. They use dynamic loading of the pages so that the user don't get any feeling saying that this page is taking long. So they open the dedicated channel between the browser and their server, and a lot of clicks have been done. So that's why they load very, very fast. And another motivation is, you can see JavaScript has become a default to language for server-side scripting, and especially for client-side scripting, right? And it's also one of the most popular languages being used, so that's why it is also important to know it. Right, so some brief history of the JavaScript. So it was started in 1995 when Netscape and Sun they introduced it. They introduced the browser, and you needed a scripting language to interact with the browser components and do validations on the client side. So then Microsoft introduced JScript, as I mentioned before. There was a lot of competition, and back in the days when we used to work in 2002, 2003, the JavaScript is different from JavaScript, so you need to write different functions based on the browser or something like that, browser specific functions, and so that was one of the challenges during this. And then, as I mentioned before, there was standardization for the client-side scripting. So ECMCA script 1 edition and things like that. So around 2009, 2010 approximately, the ECMCA 262 edition was accepted as an industry standard. And there hasn't been much changes after this one, so which is called the JavaScript 2.0, which contains all these advanced features. And back in days, only Firefox and Chrome used to support a lot of features, but now by default, all the browsers, they support all these basic functionality. So, and this is the guy who actually the main brain behind JavaScript and Mozilla and Firefox and things like that, right? So it got inspired by other languages, no doubt about it. So first of all, Java, it inspired a lot with the syntax, and also it's a small set of the scripting and things like that. One important thing is JavaScript is not an object-oriented language. So you don't have object-oriented features or enforcement like C# in Java, right? So so that's why it has some JavaScript object-oriented features. What it does is it got this self from a language called self. This is called classless object orientation and prototype-based inheritance and dynamic typing. Right? So dynamic typing is one of the important stuff we will see today. And again, why it needs to has this loosely scripted? Because when you write code in Java or C#, they have the virtual environment running the code, right? So, for example, if you have a C# code, when you run the C# code, there is a virtual environment which is installed on the computer, and that will run the code. It knows how to execute a C# exe, or Java virtual runtime environment knows how to execute a program in Java. But when you have the browser, you don't expect the people to download stuff, right? So for example, let's say if you go to a page, if you go to a website, if the website asks you to download a virtual environment or some kind of exe or some kind of file, then people don't do it, right? Because it leads to a lot of privacy violations and a lot of hacks on the user computer and things like that. So that's why the scripting language, when they developed it like a very lightweight language, which doesn't need the compilation, or there is no compilation, only interpretation or interpreting the language, and that is how this design was inspired. And it got the inspiration for regular expressions and the functional programming features, especially the closures and higher order functions. What is a higher order function? It is nothing but you send functions to the functions. For example, in any language, in Java or C#, what are the parameters for a function? Normally, you will use the basic type, built-in basic types, right? For example, if you are writing a function in C# or Java, normally you will pass integers, you will pass strings, and these are the basic types you will pass. But on the other hand, functional programming languages, they allow you to pass the functions as parameters, right? And then you can do a lot of advanced stuff using this when you allow functions as parameters, and when you return functions from the functions as written parameters, or when you return them from the functions. So these are the advanced features we will maybe see next class or something like that. Okay, first thing is JavaScript has no static type checking. So that means you don't need to declare what type of variable you are creating, right? So every value has a type at runtime. So what does it mean? Every variable has a type. The type is decided by the value you pass to the variable. So that is called the dynamic typing. And one more important thing, don't worry, I will take some examples and run the code and show you what it means, right? Another distinct feature when you work with the other programming languages is if you work with Java or C#, the object-oriented programming languages, you have to declare a type. They are called the static type checking languages. So what does it mean? You declare the type of the variable, and the type of the variable don't change during the execution of the program, or it doesn't change during the course of the program until unless you typecast it. Until unless you specifically change the type to some other type, it doesn't change the type declaration, right? So the conversions have to be boxed, or you can say typecasted in those languages. But JavaScript, it is a dynamic, there is no static type written. As I mentioned before, the value of the type of the variable is decided by the value we pass, right? So that's why it uses this automatic type conversion, which easily converts from one type to other. So that is quite easily done. So the type of the variable, you cannot assume that it is a standard during the execution of the program. Okay, so let me take some examples, right? So what I will do is you can run the JavaScript in many ways, right? So you can, for example, you can save the file as a JavaScript with JS extension, and then you can open with any browser. The browser will execute the JavaScript because each browser has a JavaScript runtime, right? So more or less, they follow the ECMCA, MEA, the latest scripting language formats or something like that. But I use a simple program. So you can see my console, right? So let me quit it. So this is called Rhino, which is nothing but a simple interpreter. Basically this is like you can say a command line tool where you can write JavaScript and interpret it and things like that. So this is called the Rhino interpreter. And what is Rhino interpreter? It is nothing but the JavaScript written using the Java language, right? So this is a Java language based interpreter where you can write the code and you can interpret it, check it using the console. This is very easy when you are doing the JavaScript for the Node.js and the client-side scripting and other kinds of things, right? You can test the code for the client side, and also you can test the code for the server side. Those kinds of things. It is quite flexible, and you can also use Visual Source Code. There are many editors, so you can find a editor which is convenient for you, right? So and if you want to try Rhino, so I put here some links. So you can download the Rhino COM interpreter, and then you can, this is just like a jar file. So if you have the Java installed, you can start it, and then it will open the interpreter. So let me just open the interpreter. And which IDEs normally you use for programming JavaScript?
Yeah, students, you can share. Yeah, VS Code. Yeah.
VS Code, yeah. VS Code is good and easy user interface. So let me. So basically you download the Rhino 174 jar file from the here, and then when you call the jar file, it will open this interpreter. So now the 174 version is loaded into the console, right? So basically, and again, why do you go with Rhino? Because it offers some good functionality. For example, it has a print support function. So you might have known, if you have programmed with JavaScript, there is no print in the JavaScript, right? So JavaScript always use console.log. If you want to write something to the console, or if you want to write something to the web page and the things like that, you need to use those functions. In case of console, you need to write console.log, and then some other the output you want to write to the screen. And but it has some good functionality like the print, version, and loading the files, reading the files, and all other good functionality, right? So that's why it is quite easy. Okay, so let's take some examples. So I was saying that JavaScript is you can see my console, right? So do you want me to increase the font and things like that? Okay, so it should be
visible, sir.
Okay. So let us try to understand this dynamic typing, right? So what is dynamic typing? Let me take some examples. Just 1 second. Okay, so let us take, so first of all, you will declare the variable using the var keyword. So var is optional. You can skip it, but var indicates that it's you are going to declare a variable or something like that. I think I have a slide. Let's go with it. So this is how you declare a variable, where x is equal to 42. That means you are creating a variable which holds the numerical type and sending 42. And this is how you write to the output, right? So document at write line. So this will run in the browser. When you want to output in the browser, you will use the document object, which is a top level object for all the browser components, right? So the window and the all other kinds of things. So this is how you declare a variable, var keyword. It is not required, but you can also I think it's good practice to use it because it clearly indicates that you're going for a declaration and things like that. And you have automatic conversions. Let's take some. Okay, here let me do it, right? Let's say x is equal to 42, right? So then you have the variable x defined, and you can check the type of the variable using type of operator, so type of function, and the type of is a function which takes the variable and it will output the type of the name of the function, right? So sorry, it will type the, it will output the type of the variable. So here it is a numerical type, right? So it gives number. Let's say that now what I do is I say, right? So I just say x is equal to Raghava, right? Now let me again check the type of and x. So now it has become string, right? So look into here how I define the variable. I just named the variable and I made an assignment, and then it automatically created a variable. And then by looking into the value which I pass, it decided the type, right? So here I'm doing an assignment again, but now I pass a string value, and the type of the variable x has changed from numerical type to the string type, right? So this is called the dynamical typing, right? And again, you can declare with the var keyword and let's say true, right? And x. Yeah. So var keyword gives it explicitly indicates that it is a variable assignment, right? So you can check different types of the variable. This is quite flexible, good, and also at the same time gives you problems, right? So if you have especially when you are looking into the code written by other people, and if they don't follow good naming conventions, it is really difficult to debug the JavaScript code. So this is called the dynamic typing. Let's go with further. So basically it has these built-in types. You have booleans, true or false, numerical formats, and string. It supports UTF-16 format, so that means you can also use all non-English languages, not Chinese, but I think Chinese is also included, UTF-6 or something like that. It has two important built-in types, a null and undefined. What is the difference between it? So can anybody say what is the difference between null and undefined in JavaScript? Any suggestions? First of all, are these things different or the same thing? Okay, let me see if I have an example.
Students, I think many are aware of JavaScript, right? Yeah, you can tell the answer.
If we won't pass any value into the variable, then it will be considered as null, right?
So if you don't pass any value, then it is considered as null, right? So let's check it.
Yes.
So
and then if you won't declare any variable, and
yeah.
if we won't declare any variable and then we try to call it, then it can show as undefined.
Okay, yeah. Let's check it, right? So even I don't remember. So let's say we declare a variable y, right? So now we have a variable y. What value does it contain? So easily we can do, what we can do is we can just print and y, and then it will try to give the value. So it contains undefined. So if you don't assign anything, so the difference between undefined and null is that when you declare a variable, if you don't have assigned any value to it, then it is called it contains undefined, because it is declared but not instantiated. So that is that's why it will contain a value undefined. But on the other hand, let's say that null is a explicit value. So for example, let's say I do like this, right? So now let me print y. Then it contains value null. What is null? Null is an explicit indication that we don't have any value, right? So for example, let's say that let me give a good example, right? So null. Let us say that you are loading a file from the computer, right? So you are basically reading a file from the hard disk. Let us say that the file path which you specified doesn't exist on the hard disk. What happens now? When you read the file using the file reader object, right? You pass the path, and since it doesn't, you don't have the file exist at the specific location. Of course, it throws an exception. Let's say that you also handle the exception, right? So then the exception is caught and things like that. And if you look into the file pointer, you don't have any value. So that is a good indication of null value. And then what you do is when you try to use this file reader, you will check for null value. If it is null value, you don't use it because you know that it will throw exception. But if it's not null value, then you will start reading the file using the file pointer, right? So that's why you have this null and undefined. Okay, so let's go further. So these are the primitive types which we have, and then we have the object. And again, JavaScript, everything is an object. You can roughly say that everything is implemented an object. Again, remember this is a loosely developed scripting language, right? So even the billion types, the built-in types, they are declared using the objects, but you don't see it in the definition. In the background, these are nothing but the object with some properties defined on it. So that means you cannot extend it, you cannot modify the properties of the Boolean, integers, and string. So that's why they call the primitive types, or you can say a wrapped object type or something like that. Null is an object and undefined is a type. So let's go further. An object is identity of collection and name. So let's look into the object properties, right? So an object is nothing but it contains some properties, some values, right? So, and each property can have a primitive value, or it can also have a reference to an object as well. So basically, it's like a map between the properties and the values, just like the dictionary, right? If you look into the dictionary in Python and other languages, you have a key and you have value. Value could be like a numerical value, a string type value, or it could be a dictionary pointer to a dictionary or something like that. So this similarly to you also have this object is nothing but a map between the finite map between the strings and value. Values could be like primitive type or even advanced type. And you can specify some special attributes on the read only. So that means the you cannot change the value of the property, and don't delete. And don't delete means you are not able to delete the property and things like that. So internal means it's only private or something like that. Let's take some examples to understand this, right? Okay, so let me run some JavaScript code. So let me bring my. Okay. So what I will do is I will create an object. So how do you create an object? Basically, you will say. So let me create a simple object. So you define a variable, and then if you put curly braces, and this is the definition of an object, right? So this is an empty object; it doesn't have anything. So just we'll check the type property, and then we'll go further. So it's an object, right? So let us, and what you can do is you can also put all the properties. Remember, I was saying that it is nothing but a combination of properties, right? So now what I'm creating is I'm creating an object X with a property A. A has is the property and the object, and with value 42, right? So this is an object. You can try this type of. So this is an object, And when you have an object, what you can do is you can access the properties like this, x.a42. You can also do like this, x, like the dictionary based thing. So you can put the name of the property on the object like this with curly braces, and then also you can access it, right? So yeah. And you can check whether a property exists in the object or not like this. So for example, you can say that whether A in X, so that means it will check whether the property A is in the X or not, right? So in the object or not. Not only that, you can do so many weird things using the objects. Now let me go and do it, right? So see what I have. I have an object X, which contain a property A. And now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to call a property B, which don't exist on the object, right? So what do you think what will happen now? Anyone? Exception? Right? So we should expect exception based on our knowledge from the normal programming languages. See what happened? Nothing. So that means let me put a print statement and call B. So it doesn't throw exception, right? So, but you can also do pretty weird things. X dot B equal to 10, right? So let me say X dot B. Now you have a property, right? So objects support dynamic properties. So that means you can construct the object easily, right? So you can add properties and you can also delete properties. I will show you how to delete properties and things like that. You can do all the sorts of the weird things it allows. So now let me do something like this. So I'm saying that X dot undefined is 7, right? So according to our logic, X is an object, and we are defining we are calling a property on undefined and assigning value 7. So let's do it. So it's perfectly fine, and you can also check whether the X has the just 1 second. So X dot undefined. It is created. You can also do like this, X dot T. Now what will happen? Let's check it. So you can see what happened here. Can anybody say? I'm just using the object and using the square braces, and then I'm calling X dot P. Do we have a property by name P? No. And it simply returned the, let me print this one, right? So X dot P, what is X dot P? X dot P is undefined. And I have a property called undefined. So it takes the undefined value as undefined property name, and it returns 7. Right? So remember, you can easily add properties on the fly without knowing, and you have some object, but you can do many things. Right? So for example, any questions so far? Okay. And let us go further. Let's say that X dot P, I don't know, P doesn't have any value, right? So let's say that I put K. Now what happens? Any guess? Throws an exception. Why? Because you can call a property, you can call with a property name which don't exist in object. That's perfectly fine, because it will give you, say that, okay, it is undefined, right? If I print px.p, then it says undefined because there is no property p on the object x. But on the other hand, if I say that x.p.k, then it throws exception. The reason is x.p is nothing but undefined, and you are calling the property name k on the undefined object, so that's why it throws an exception. So remember, sometimes it throws exception and sometimes it doesn't throw exception. When it throws exception and when it doesn't throw exception, it's quite important to understand. Otherwise, you will be in trouble, right? So then if you are in a situation, you get an exception, then you need to use try and catch block and things like that. Okay, so another way to, how do we know that what are the properties we have in the object? So for example, let's say that, let me use this one. It says, yeah. So here, what I'm trying to say is for all where I in X. So that means for all the properties, I am printing the values, right? So it prints three values: A, the property A, property B, and undefined, right? So these are the three properties. And you can also delete the property in the runtime. So for example, let's say that I want to delete property x dot b, right? So delete b. Then let us run this code again. Now you can see I only have A and undefined, right? So you can also delete the properties directly. Okay, so let's, any questions so far? So this is undefined, and yeah, I will click. Okay, and you can, yeah, you can look through the property names using for, because it supports for and while. So like normal programming language, you can use a for, or you can also use for each. So both are supported, and then there is not much difference between them. Right? Okay, so let's go further, and predefined objects. We have the predefined objects, and we have some of the constructs, right? Data structures, array, date, math, and regular expressions, and similar to many Java classes. And you also have the global objects, which are windows, window object or the document object in the browser to get access to the browser components and things like that. So type conversion, let us look into some of the examples of the type conversions, right? So they are performed as needed. So basically types are converted to do, again, we have seen that there are some predefined types and some derived types, right? So these are the predefined types. Booleans, strings, function, these are all predefined types, string. And then what happens is, based on the type conversion, sometimes these types are converted to the basic type. Sometimes they are converted to the object, and vice versa. So let's take examples to look into type conversions. So some of the type conversions, they make good sense. So for example, if you write true like this within the quotes, and then it is converted to, if you have two, and based on the situation, it can be converted to two within the quotes if needed. And also, if you have written two within the quotes, and it can also be converted to the numerical value 2. And then you have some crazy things. If you have one can be converted to true, but let's take this example, right? So let me type here. So let me print here. So basically I'm printing, right? So basically so basically what I'm trying to test here is the equality between 1 and true. So I'm just printing 1 is equal to true. Remember, 1 is equal to is assignment. If you have 2 is equal to, then it is like a equality check, right? So whether they are equal or not. So let's see it. And then you have true returns true. So that means 1 is internally converted to true. So that's why true is equal to true. That's why it returns. But let us do one thing, right? Print true. Now guess what happens? Any guess? Will it print true or false? So it prints false, right? Why so? So 1 is always converted to true. So because it's a shorthand for the true value, and any value other than 1 is converted to if you are typecasting it to Boolean, it will be converted to false. So that is important to know about it. So for example, if you have 0 and let's say false, then it returns true, because any value other than 1 is converted to false. So now it is converted to false, and then it returns true. Any questions or comments? What happens now? So here we have 1 within the quotes, right? So this is nothing but a string, right? Here you have string. On the other hand, I have true, and then let's see what happens now. It returns true. What might have happened? So then it has the string value. The string is converted to numerical value, automatically dynamic conversion, and 1 is always converted to true. So that's why you have this true conversion happen. And also you can get into situations like this. Then it also, do you expect it returns to true? No, right? So this is a string true, which is not equal to the Boolean value true, right? So, but why in this case it converted into true? The reason is you have so let me explain how the interpreter will evaluate, right? So on one hand, you have this true, right, which is a Boolean value. And you have the equality operator. So you are checking whether the two values are equal or not. On the other hand, you have a string type, right? So you cannot equate both string and Boolean. So it needs to convert into the Boolean type. So that's why it first converts into a numerical value. So then you will get 1. And 1 is converted to Boolean value as true. So then that's why it returns true. But in this case, this is clearly nothing but a string containing true value. So here you have the Boolean value. So it tries to typecast it to the numerical value. This is not a numerical value, so it doesn't convert into numerical value. And now it says that on one hand, I have a string. On the other hand, you have a Boolean type true. So these two are not equal. So that's why it returns false. And you can get so many weird conversions, and sometimes they make sense, and sometimes they don't make sense. Any white space string is converted to 0. So that means if you have empty string, you have a single space is converted to 0. And this is true. And what about this one? Maybe let's check it. So can you see the troubles with the dynamic type checking? Of course, dynamic type checking is really good, but on the other hand, it also leads to a lot of confusion, right? So these kinds of problems you don't get in the regular programming languages because you have a proper static type checking, which will check for the values and the types and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go further. And we have seen three important operators. So one is the assignment. So this is nothing but assigning value B to A. And we have seen the equality operator, so which checks whether the two values are equal or not. And have you seen this 3 equal to? Does anyone have used 3 equals to in the JavaScript language? Yeah. Okay. Maybe can you explain what it is or why you use it? Okay, so
Sir,
yeah, go
it
ahead.
is
Yeah.
Like double equals to are generally used like to check any value. Like one, you
Equal.
have mentioned it, right? 1 equals to 2. But whereas in 3 equals to, we can do it for checking variables to compare variables.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for putting it. Putting it. You're right. So basically, you will use this 3 equal to where there is no coercion happens. What is coercion? Coercion is trying to convert one type to other, right? So if we go here we have one. On one hand, we have the one within the quotes. On the other hand, you have the true, Boolean true. But it returns the true when we check the equality between these two things. What happened here is the interpreter will try to check with these two values, right? Two values and the values between the two variables. And then it sees that they are not equal. So one is Boolean, one is string, right? So then it tries to do conversion, type conversion. So that is called the coercion. If possible, it will try to convert into a suitable type so that it can make a comparison. So in this case, it numerical value, first it tries to convert a numerical value. Now we get 1, and 1 can be easily converted to true. So true equal to true, true is equal to true. So that's why it returns true. Right? So this is called the coercion. But if you use 3 quotes, let us take the same example. 1. Now I put 3 quotes, and let's say true, which is Boolean true, and let's see. Now it says false. The reason is when you use 3 quotes, which is called the identity operator. Identity operator means it says that, okay, check the basic, the types of the values. Don't do anything, right? Don't do any crazy things of type conversion. Take the values as it is, and take the variables as it is, and compare their base type without any coercion. So that's why then it returns true. So when you are having a lot of complicated code and things like that, and if you are pretty much sure about this object and things like that, this is a very better operator to compare, because it doesn't do you are not allowing the interpreter to do all these type conversion automatically. It will check the basic data types. It can lead to some really the crazy conversions, right? So yeah, it can, if you compare null and undefined, then it returns to true, even though they are not the same. And if you use 3 quotes, then it returns to false. Similarly, NaN, it is not a numerical value, which is also evaluated to false. And these are some crazy ones, right? So let us see some of these type conversions when it happens automatically. You have the arithmetic operators, plus, minus, and multiplication and division and things like that. And these operators are basically defined between the numerical values, right? And they are overloaded for the string values. So for example, you can use the plus between the strings. Let's see, let me do it. So right? So it concatenates. So when you have the string values, it will concatenate. But on the other hand, when you have the numerical values, it does the summation, right? So these are the things it can do, and that can give you into some troubles, right? So for example, let's take some of the examples, right? So let's say that I have 2 on one hand side, and I have an expression on the right hand side, 4 within the quotes and minus within the quotes with value 2. And what will happen now? It returns 2 because you have the minus operator. So minus operator is only defined between the numerical values, right? But on the other hand, if you have plus here, let's see what will happen. It's interesting to see. Now let me put 4 and plus 2. So now what will it print? It print false, right? The reason is you have the plus operator overloaded for the string values. When you have the 2 string values, the plus operator is nothing but a concatenation operator. But when you have the minus operator, there is no minus overload for the string value. So for example, you can write like this, hello. And it throws not a numerical value because it tries to convert into numerical value. It tries to convert into numerical value. It doesn't make any sense, these values. So then it returns a not a non-value, right? So it tries to convert using the overloaded operators. So yeah, let's go further a bit and then you have the Boolean operators AND and OR, which can be easily used to make comparisons and things like that. So let's move further. All objects coherent to Boolean value. So for example, if you have an object, then it will always be typecasted to true. And if you have a null value or undefined, then they will be typecasted to false. So for example, here we have an object here, and it has 2 properties. And if you say a dot b, b has a value, then it can typecast to true. But on the other hand, if you say a dot d, because d is not defined on the object, so it will return undefined, right? So undefined will be typecasted to false. So these are, you have to be careful about these type conversions and things like that. Then it also supports strings, which is, and then you have the plus operator, which actually concatenation operator defined between the strings. So if you have like this, it will concatenate the strings, right? And indexing, you can get the substring operator, and you can use the square braces to get the substring and things like that. And it also supports what you call range type of indexing, I guess. Maybe let's check it. Right, so we have A, and then let us print A. Let's say 2.5. Okay. Okay, it doesn't support like this. So only it will support the substring. It doesn't support the range, right? So Python supports range in a very elegant manner. So yeah, you get L here. So yeah, what will happen here? if you have 1 plus 3 with a plus sign in between, then the concatenation happens between the strings. And here also you will get the same kind of thing. We can maybe test it here. Let's quickly test run these examples. So this will return true, no doubt about it, right? So and what happens here? So what should happen here? In ideal way, it should be converted to 1 can be converted to 3. Sorry, 3 can be 3 within the string. 3 can be converted to 3, so it should 4, and then it should return false, right? But it returns true. The reason is since 1 is integer and 1 is string data type, so it tries to convert both into strings. So there is a precedence in concatenation and things like that. In this case, it will return false. That's expected. But yeah, let us say this one. What will happen here? Can anybody? Does it return true or does it return false? Maybe let us take a half a minute or something like that to think about it.
Maybe true, sir.
Maybe true. Why do you think so?
Sir, it will be typecasted to.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, sir. I thought it will be typecasted to a string.
You are right. So that's why I'm saying yes, it will be typecasted to not to string. The reason is, look into here. This is the reason why I use these examples always, right? So here you have basically what is the minus operator. Minus operator is subtraction, right? And minus operator is only defined for numerical values, right? There is no, because we have seen previously that there is no minus operator defined between the two strings. I try to use minus operator, it throws an exception, right? When it sees the minus operator, okay, minus is only defined between two integer types. So I have one integer on one hand type, then it automatically tries to convert into a integer, because the minus operator is only defined for integers, right? So then it automatically converts into a int value 2, and 4 minus 2, then you get 2, and 2 is equal to 2. So that's why it gives you a true value. And here also, let us take this one just to understand what happens here. So based on our experience, what do you think it will return here? True or false?
True. True, sir.
Yeah, true. That's true, because again, when you look into here, these are the two conversions. So it will get a 2 here, and then you have 2 on one hand side and you have string 2 on the other hand side. Automatically, the string 2 is converted to numerical value, because it can be converted and things like that. So these things are possible. So that's why when you make comparisons, especially between the variables, and during the program execution, since the value of the variable can easily change from one type to other, so it can have a lot of side effects, right? So that's why you have to be careful using what type. And sometimes it's also a good practice to check the type of a variable before you make comparisons and things like that. So the comparisons can lead to several unforeseen items and things like that. So wrappers, what is wrapper? You can the string is a basic type, right? So as I told you before, everything is implemented in the form of objects. And I have shown you that how to create a dynamic properties of the object, right? So, but when you have a basic type, which are called the wrapper objects, right? You can also create values, but it doesn't store. So that is the only one thing here I want to show. Okay, let's go to the arrays. So arrays are defined using the syntax. You have the curly braces, and maybe let me take some examples here. So the arrays are not strongly typed. So basically, what does it mean? So you can mix the different types like Python. So here I have an array containing 2, 3, and a string value, right? So this is fine. And you can check the length of the array. So print, I think array dot length. I think, yeah. Right, so basically it gives you, and the arrays are also dynamically expanded. For example, let's say that array, of course, the way you access the elements is using the index. So let's say if I put 0, I will get the first element. So it will give me the first element. So let's say that if I put 50th element, 6, right? If you do this this sort of coding in object-oriented languages, then it will immediately throw exception, right? Because you have to define arrays with the, you have to say how many number of elements you will store while creating the array, because array is nothing but a contiguous memory location in the memory location created in the memory, right? So, but JavaScript is very loosely typed, so I can say that I want to store 6 at the 51th element of error, right? So let's see what we have in array. You can see here, when I assign this one, it dynamically created the array, and it put the value at the 51th location, and it put the values, null values, or no values in the array. I think we will also print. Let me do like this, array 5 undefined. So because there is no value, right? So it dynamically expand the values. So for example, if you again assign it to like this, 1000, and then you get 1000. If you say array, then it expands it to the 1000 values, right? So they can be expanded or truncated. So how do you truncate? So for example, if you say array dot length is let's say 55, right? Okay, then say array, then you truncated the array to 55 elements, right? So now my 45 value and all other values are gone. So you can shrink it or you can expand it as you want. Okay, so let's go with some interesting stuff. So these are the examples. Yeah, I want to show dynamic code evaluation. So this is one of the important features which is not available, or you can say which is available in the object-oriented languages, but it requires a lot of precision. For example, reflection. Have you heard about reflection in Java or C#, which is like creating the objects and classes dynamically in the runtime, right? So which is a very strong, powerful functionality, which is only used when you want to create dynamically, right? So it can also have a lot of side effects and things like that. But the way you can execute code dynamically in JavaScript is using eval function. Eval is nothing but a function which takes a code snippet and it will process and it will evaluate the values, right? So it can have several side effects. So that's why you have to use it with care and things like that. You can create new functions and dynamically and do like that. So let me take some examples. I have some examples. So let's see. So let's say that I have created a variable x with 5 value. And then what I do is I define a code snippet using string variable, right? So this is my code snippet. So I define a str variable, which is nothing but string. And what I have here is I have all some piece of code. You can say if x is equal to 5, then z is equal to 42 in assignment, else z is equal to 0, right? So what I mean to say here is I'm just using a conditional statement, if and else conditional statements, and based on the value of x, I'm assigning the z value, right? A simple piece of code, but enclosed within the string. So that means this will, if you execute this one, nothing will happen. If you say str, it contains a piece of code, right? And if you say z, it will throw exception because there is no z, right? Because we haven't defined z so far. So that's why it got an exception. But what we do is let's call eval function. Eval is a function which is used for dynamic code evaluation. You pass the code and you call the eval function, and then it will execute the code, right? So I have the code in str, and then I say eval.str, then it will execute the code, and it creates a new variable z, and z value is 42 because x is 5. So it checks the value of x from the memory, and it contains 5. So it assigned 42, right? So let me print z. It's 42, right? So now previously it thrown exception. Now the variable z is available. So this is how most of the advanced programmer in JavaScript, they write code and functions which are not visible to the people, right? Whenever you download, let's say that you access the Facebook, right? Facebook content use a lot of JavaScripting for the dynamic loading of the pages very fast. And if you try to look into the JavaScript coding, it is very crippled, and a lot of these hacks, they will do it because they create the dynamic code evaluation and things like that so that they create the objects and other things dynamically. So you have no clue what is happening in the behind the scenes and things like that. So you can change the value. For example, what happens if I say x is equal to 6, right? And then if I do the same code evaluation, so you can say eval.str. So basically same rule, right? So now it assigns the value to 0. So that means it can read the values from the global scope and things like that. Any questions or comments? Yeah, exceptions you can use try catch finally. So this is like a normal any programming language. So basically if you get an error, then you can use try catch exception if you're expecting it. Right? So regular expressions, there is a very good support of regular expressions. I don't go into that one. It's a pretty big subject, and the JavaScript has a very good support for it, and it was inspired by Perl. Perl is quite suitable, and they have a very good support for regular expression. So similarly, you can define the regular expression and create an object, and you apply it on any string, then it will do a lot of things. Okay, so let me quickly, we are coming to end. Let me quickly show some functions and lambda expressions, things like that. So, okay, defining a function and declaring a function and defining a function as the expression is completely different. So for example, let us say we have function like this. Where is my, oh yes. So So here I'm defining a function. So the way you create functions is called by in code is by using a new function. Otherwise, normally how JavaScript functions are written. So for example, let's write a JavaScript function. So function, right? So and add, and you pass two values, x, y. Sorry, let me write it here. Just 1 second. Let me write it in the editor and then one. So for example, you write the functions like this, right? So if you say add one, so this is a function declaration, right? So you declare the function which is available and things like that. But on the other hand, if you write functions like this as part of the expressions, right? So this is called the function expression. So what we are trying to do is you are trying to create a new function and then assigning it to a variable. So now add contains a function declaration. So for example, if you say add, then it gives you the function, and you can pass this function declaration to any function. That's what I was saying, higher order functions, right? You can pass this as a parameter, and the another function can call it, and then it will dynamically execute inside another function and things like that. So remember, function declaration and function expression are completely different. And the way you define functions, let us take a Fibonacci function, right? Do you know what is a Fibonacci number? Fibonacci is nothing but a good
Yes,
number where, yeah, you know what is Fibonacci number, right? So this is a function for Fibonacci numbers. So basically, you contain it will if it is 1, it returns the 1. Otherwise, it will return the Fibonacci of the previous two numbers, right? Sum of the two Fibonacci numbers. So you can now call this Fibonacci, right? So then it gives you the value, right? If you say 15, the 15th Fibonacci number, then it goes, and then let's say 25. You know, Fibonacci function, the implementation is exponential. If you try 50, if you go for 30, 40, then it takes so much time because the number of calls exponentially increases. Okay, so this is about the function declarations and everything. And then the number of parameters in the function does not match. So for example, what does it mean? Let me again take some example. So let me create a function here, right? So I have inc. What is inc? Is nothing but a function taking one parameter. What happens if I call the function the function with two parameters, right? So I call inc and I pass 5 and I also pass a string or something like that. What will happen? Normally in object-oriented programming languages, this will be a compiler error because compiler will find the error saying that there is only one parameter expected for the inc, but you are passing two parameters. It doesn't really matter here. It simply ignores. Right. So this is also one of the things it happens, right? And yeah. you can use argument object. So let's say that when you pass the parameters, right? Let's imagine that you are writing a function and you don't know how many parameters you will get as input. Then how do you find it, right? So because people can pass several parameters, so even though the function is defined with only one parameter, and sometimes you can pass many parameters, right? How do we actually find out how many number of parameters the user has passed to a function at the runtime? So what you can do is you can use this arguments object. Let me show you the code, run the code and show you. So this is let's say list, right? So if I say list, so this is the function which I created. So basically I take one parameter, right, separator, and then basically what I'm trying to do is I'm just taking all the parameters passed to this function and concatenating with the separator and outputting the value. Let me execute it and then you will see how we do it, right? So let me call this function with some values. So this is the separator and I say foo, bar and bars, right? Then you will get a return value saying that getting all the variables appended with the separator. Right? So if you look into the code, because here the main problem is we don't know how many parameters the user has passed, right? So what you can do is you can call the arguments object. So arguments is nothing but a defined built-in object. Inside the function, it will give you the number of arguments passed by the user. So in this case, we have 4 because we have 4 parameters passed here, right? So it will get the value 4, and we know the first one is the separator, and rest of the values are the rest of the parameters are the values. So we just simply concatenate and listen to each other. So these things, when you have a situation like that, arguments is an important object which you can use. So you can also call methods associated with the function. So basically, what is the difference between a method and a function, right? A function is defined defined in the global scope or in any other scope, which has a life independent of the object. On the other hand, method is nothing but a function defined inside an object. So the scope of the method is only confined to the object. So if you don't have an object, then there is no scope for the function, right? So that is the method, the definition of method. Okay, so we are almost with the time. Let me finish the functions and then we can see, right? So, and you can also add properties on the function. So for example, let me execute this one. Let me take a few minutes, right? And then I will close the class. So for example, we have the function. Maybe we can use list, right? So let's say that we have the function list, and then you can add description. And you can put whatever the information that is helper to the callers of the function. So this function expect a separator and concatenate all the parameters. Right. So and then this could be used as a helper function on the function. So for example, if you say that list.description and it has created a new property on the function, so you can see that the functions are actually implemented as objects. So basically the object is the base type in the JavaScript, and everything is implemented using the objects, right? So here we have a function, and you can also call new keyword. Remember, new keyword will be used for creating new instances of the objects, and so even you can use it for the functions, right? So that's how you can the functions are defined using the objects. So, and then you can also call the function in the dynamic evaluation code. For example, let's say that you are creating functions using this eval function, like dynamic code evaluation and things like that. And then this call method is quite useful. Call is nothing but you can a keyword on the functions, right? So what does it does? What does it do? It will take the instance object and it will take the parameters, and then it will call that method on the using the by passing these values as input parameters. So it is nothing but creating the new instance in the dynamic code evaluation. Okay, so and again, it's so when you have the functions inside the functions and things like that, it is quite difficult to find out the scope. For example, if you have a function like this, two nested functions, and if you run the functions across different browsers, and different browsers based on their implementation, you will get values like this. So that's why be careful when you write the code for all the browsers, which has to work in all the browsers, then you have to check it very carefully. Let me stop here. I think yeah, prototypes is a way to create inheritance in the JavaScript, because this is not an object-oriented programming language, right? So let me finish. Let me cover this one and stop it, right? So for example, if you want to create the class variables, right? How do you do that? Then you do it by using prototype, because prototype is for each. Let's say that you have a an object, right? And you create some instances of the foo, and all the instances they get to the parent by using this proto property. So if you want to define a instance, a class level variable, or I can say instance variable, the way to do it is using the prototype property. Each function will have a prototype property, which will be the static pointer, you can say. You can create variables on the static pointer, and then it acts like a static variable. So let me run this one, and then we can close. Yeah, so here is my function. So here I have a function foo, and it's a very simple function, you can say, and which has a property name, right? So, and then it keeps track of the how many instances I'm creating. Okay? So the way to keep track of the instances, how many instances I'm creating of this function, is by using prototype property. I call that foo.prototype, and I create a counter, which is like a variable, right? So, and then whenever the function is created, I'm just incrementing this value. Right, so let me create some instance of it. So let me first instantiate the prototype the counter to 0. Otherwise, it might throw exception, right? So then let me create some instances. Say new foo, and then you can also create another instance. So I created two instances of it, right? So let me check x.counter. It creates new, and y.counter. it has two because we have the two instances, right? So similar to the objects, when you want to have a common type of static variable, static value, you define using the prototype, right? So for example, if you create another instance, maybe let me call it as same instance, right? One more time. And now let me see how much we have the x dot counter. I created 4 instances, so it contains a value. So this is how you can create the static values, or you can say static variables across different function calls. You can create a static variable inside a function which don't get changed for each, which has the same value across all the instances. For example, x, y, and all other instances, it has the same value. Okay, so let me close the session here. Then, then we will go to the Solidity next week. Any questions so far? Maybe you can go to the slides, rest of the slides. Yeah, they contain some pretty good programming features like the variable scoping and also how to define namespaces and those kinds of things. If you have any questions, then we'll take it. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. I think we are a bit late as well, so 10 minutes delay.
Any questions, students? Okay, Professor, then we can conclude. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you.